I've heard a lot of people say things like, would a loving God send someone to hell? And the answer to that often ends up being, well, hell is God giving people what they want. A loving God isn't going to force you into heaven. Or a loving God is one who will, hell exists, but it's a prison locked from the inside by the person. None of that is biblical. In fact, what it is trying to apologize and trying to adapt to a question that's loaded. So the question is asked by people who have rejected God, and yet then they want to turn around and use one of God's attributes to defend themselves. So when they reject God because they say they don't believe in him, or they don't like the exclusivity of the gospel, they say, well, but wait a minute, would a loving God really send me to hell? And the answer, I'll get to that in a minute, the question presupposes that a loving God would not send someone to hell. So then it puts the Christian apologist on his heels saying, well, of course not. But actually, the answer is yes, a loving God would. Because a loving God is also a just God. And a just God is one that must punish sin. And we are all sinners, and a loving God actually is one who gives us a way out. And so the love of God is shown in his gospel. And when we reject that gospel, we're rejecting his love. So we can't then turn around and say, well, would a loving God send me to hell? Yes, a just God is also a loving God. And he cannot have sin in his presence. It must be paid for. And it's either paid for by the gospel, by his Son who paid for it, or it's not paid at all. And we remain under sin. So in that instance, it is true that people choose to remain under wrath, but God's wrath is upon them. So it is a loving God who sends people to hell who have rejected his gospel. And his gospel is evidence of his love. And so I don't think that folks who use that argument are doing it themselves any favor, because they're playing into this loaded question. The question isn't whether a loving God would send people to hell. The question really is, why do you, if God is loving, reject him? And the answer is you don't believe he's a loving God, and therefore you are rebelling against the one who actually loves you and provided his Son to pay for your sins. Hope this helps.